a tissue will persist despite the deaths of individual cells. And I would think that in an organization, you want the team to be able to continue to function despite the replacement of individual team members. So then the question is, what is it that holds the team or the tissue together and allows it to persist over a long period of time and continue in its function despite the replacement and sometimes removal, deletion of a particular component? I think that is extremely important. You also bring up an incredibly difficult problem with the question of boundaries. Once again, we tend to think of boundaries on a mechanical model. We tend to think of a boundary as the edge of a physical, concrete, material object. So this part physically, concretely, materially ends here, and that's the boundary of that part. But when you think about, once again, an ecosystem which has a lot of different layers, the different layers are separated, are bounded by, for example, rate differences. So the principles, the decisions that a CEO makes will be much longer lasting. They will be more strategic compared to the decisions that a team leader must make to get that team to perform what it's supposed to do. So components usually operate at faster rates than the embedding context in which they are located. And I think that is true for ecosystems. I think that is true for firms. The boundary of each layer of organization in a system has a sui generis rate at which it goes to completion. And so therefore, I don't think the metaphor is that far off. And so thinking of boundaries more in the sense of what is coupled to what? How fast does that cycle go? So thinking in terms of network theory rather than in a traditional sense of physical boundaries, I think is much more useful. But again, it brings out the point you've raised a couple of times already. How do we change the way of viewing complex systems to think of boundaries, for example, in terms of rate differences or centrality of connectivity, that sort of thing that network theory talks about, rather than physical boundaries, what's located physically in a particular location, for example.